So we want to hear directly from people engineering the foundations of the AI native organizations. So we want to invite the people on stage right now. So Eva, here we are back. So we do a little déjà vu. We have another applause for Eva. Eva Marie Hempe. You're responsible for the public sector for NVIDIA. Everybody knows NVIDIA, of course. Great brand. So I want to join on the panel Alan Aslajanik, the CEO of Visium. There you are. Big applause. Thank you. Then we have the head of the office for Member of Parliament, Axel Voss, Kai Zenner. Please join the panel. So we have the European Parliament as well. And then we have Ujjwal Kumar. He's the principal architect of Microsoft Asia, leading the enterprise AI and quantum safe solutions. Another applause, please. So maybe one sentence to all of you. What's the single most critical architectural foundation to enable AI at scale? Just quick question. If you don't want to comment, you don't have to, because not everybody's technical, okay, right? So maybe you want to start?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, it's open interoperable platform. And the reason I'd like to give a quick analogy on that, like today we are building cities. If you think about AI systems, it's like beautiful buildings, but all operating in silos. What we're talking about interoperable open platform is to be able to connect with protocols like MCP, A2A, agent protocols. You're talking about electricity systems, water systems, which interconnects the whole thing to get the holistic value of AI.
Eva.
I would say it's AI factories. So the factory of the future, the factory of this next industrial revolution is the AI factory, where you import electricity and data and out comes intelligence. And that, I think it's also very topical with what's being discussed in Davos right now, has also an element of sovereignty. Like you want to keep that in your country. You want to use AI to build your GDP, and what sovereignty means exactly. There's different levels. It depends what you're trying to do, who you are. But to me, that's like the building block of this.
I come back to a unified enterprise AI and data platform that, in other words, allow to make AI data and decision-making reusable across the enterprise. So in practice, this can then help organizations move from isolated pilots and point solution towards a shared and modular architecture that standardizes the way data is collected, governed, and accessed by models across the organization. Without these foundations, AI will remain fragmented. Models will be difficult to deploy, expensive to maintain, and ultimately also risky to scale. And with this foundation, teams can build once, but then deploy multiple times. And so ultimately, this makes the whole difference in really enabling then AI at scale.
Yeah, and I bring the legislative or regulatory perspective, and therefore will answer a bit different by saying the original idea of the European Union and the AI Act was to kind of build a command center. So, as I said, something a bit different than you guys said, but we thought that by pushing all companies to building up a kind of command center, as I said, or at least AI officer that has a full understanding of all the different aspects that are important for the whole AI value chain, for the whole, let's say, development and deployment circles, so thinking about data quality, thinking about risk management, thinking about incident notifications, and so on at one single point makes sense and allows the company to build and deploy AI in a much more strategic but also safe way.
Interesting. We will discuss this. Yes. The Act. So Eva, maybe the first question to you. What we see dramatically is the workload that grows, right? So, and what do you see? How can companies future-proof, like the whole compute infrastructure? while staying agile and efficient? How do you balance that?
Yeah, it's about really kind of aligning themselves with where the developers are. So it's really about, I think we said what before, platforms. So you want to not get stuck in a niche. You want to be on a platform which gives you also the most flexibility, also in terms of applications. So there are, like, on the hardware level, there's a bunch of different varieties of hardware solutions, but coincidentally, that's what NVIDIA does, but we have like the most versatile platform. I mean, you will find ASICs and specialized silicon, which can do certain things probably better, but you don't know what you're going to be running in 2 or 3 years' time. And I think another big misconception about AI, and particularly AI infrastructure, AI chips, a lot of people have like a consumer electronics model in their mind. So they think about AI like their iPhone. So once the new iPhone comes out, why would I buy the old iPhone? But this is not the same case here. Like, I have customers, particularly in my old role when I was doing healthcare and life sciences, who are running Volta chips. Volta chips are ancient. They're 7 years old, but they're still able to get value out of it, because different to an iPhone, like, a lot of useful stuff can still run on it. And I think it's really looking about it as a portfolio also in your workloads. Like, workloads are growing, but there's so many different workloads. It's a bit like with chips. I mean, yes, you have your GB300 NVIDIA super chip, but you also have like chips which are in your fridge and in your car. And you
just don't know.
Yeah, you just don't know.
Yeah,
and you basically have to kind of find a platform which serves all of them. And I think this flexibility and being able to, basically serve the whole range, I think is really key to scaling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So at Visium, I mean, you integrate, right? You integrate, you work with companies, and actually the question here is like, what are the biggest mistakes that companies do if they move AI into the core? If I listen to the first conversation we had today, we actually have very few companies that do integrate AI in the core business, but they actually do it at the edge, right? Which I remember from my Singularity times, that most of the time people say innovate at the edge first and then move to the core. So I don't know, what do you see? Do you see companies already moving AI fully into the core business, including all data and all these things? Or are companies asking you to help them? Like, what's the status? What do you see out there right now?
The biggest mistake that we see companies make repeatedly, that hinders them really to get the value at scale from AI, is adopting it and focusing on isolated point solutions across the enterprise, instead of really seeing where in their core business it can create the most value. So ultimately, this, without thinking how to integrate AI within their core business activities and how the business actually runs, so focusing beyond the specific use cases, ultimately they will not be able to change the core processes, change the decision making, or change the accountabilities of these use cases. So this leads to seeing a lot of impressive pilots, but that remain on the sideline of the business.
That's right.
They're not ultimately really transforming how the organizations work. And so to overcome this, it's really important to rethink also roles and responsibilities, accountability, building shared platforms, focusing on the right data foundations that enable this capability to be reusable. Otherwise, it will only be side exercises that are not really going to transform how company operate.
I mean, listening to this means like, this sounds like very big, like big change. It sounds like reorg. Most companies go through reorgs all the time. So reorg is not a surprise, but of course, changes like this, it's quite big. And what we heard before in the early discussions is that we have, especially the boardroom, really resisting to really push that down and really go that far, but rather either not taking decisions or waiting or being nervous about it because maybe of lack of knowledge. Do you see that as well right now? Because also, if I go back to trust, last week, Edelman presented the trust barometer, and they showed that trust in AI is decreasing this year. So it was about of course, normal people, like population, but also if you think everybody is working in a company, there's also not a lot of embracement of that technology on the workplace. So, is that a catch-22? Like, what do we do first? Like, how do we convince the workforce on one side, but also the boardroom to actually take the road that you describe? What do you think has to be done?
As you point out, it's true that trust can be low in general because there is a lot of failure rate with pilots. And it comes back to the earlier point. It's not about just focusing on the isolated point solution, but everything that goes around it, the people and processes to actually be able to adopt this and change the way we work. So the world is full of examples where, just to name one, there is a global retailer that developed a demand forecasting model to better optimize their demand planning activities. They had a massive increase of accuracy. They estimated that the business benefits would be in line of 4% of their company revenues. They did the winter season and then they did the summer season. But ultimately, a few years later, they still had massive problems managing inventory and working capital. Why? Because they didn't think how to change the process, how to set the governance, how to adapt all of the aspects that come around this. And so ultimately, given that AI is such a transversal transformation topic and nobody has necessarily the full picture, and there's so many pitfalls that make that company can fail while trying to adopt it, then sometimes the boardroom might conclude that it's just hype and the technology is not there, but quite the contrary. And as you say, there is also, and it was also discussed in the previous fireside chat and panel, there's a lot of desire to avoid risks and retain control.
Mainly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is, I don't think it's going to be the winning strategy in the coming years, given how fast the technology is advancing and what advantage this can give to other competing companies.
I think avoiding risk is a good bridge to the AI Act, right? Which is, so it's nice, Kai, so you can comment on that. Because you already started to explain why, the EU advanced in that topic. And it's also about governance. We heard the word sovereignty as well, like, the relevance on a national level. Still, I think we had it in the sessions before. There's also the question why the EU in the first place starts regulating in an area where we hear that we are so early. It's so early. But maybe you can explain a little bit the thinking behind, and that it actually is not a showstopper.
So last point, I don't know if I can, but I will start and try. So indeed, maybe just a little bit on me. I was since 2018 working on AI policy in Brussels, always in the European Parliament. So I saw basically the whole development from having some ideas that we on the policy level need to react to, really do something. Really do something in the end, as you all know, became a hard horizontal piece of legislation that is really trying to capture every use case, every sector, and so on and so on. And indeed, there is at least a tendency that we are trying to prevent all potential risks from happening, which is not possible and might not be that good for innovation, to say it carefully. The original idea, however, was, and on this original idea, I still believe, as Stefan was kind of indicating, to put together a list of principles, a little bit similar like the OECD or the UNESCO or the United Nations did, because maybe we should not stop a very early group of technology. But since AI, at least when it comes to machine learning and deep learning, really confronts our legal system with new situations, think about liability cases and so on, there was a worldwide understanding that at least to have a set of principles would help to make AI safer, but also, as you said, and what I said at the very beginning, to give companies a little bit of advice when it comes to how should you put together a kind of governance system, risk management system, what are important, things to consider, because AI is different. For example, a human in the loop, for example, data governance, to think where the data is coming from. You said sovereignty, also that played a role very early. So all those ideas, again, we're very closely connected to all those international discussions. And here the European Union was not so different, where unfortunately we kind of lost a little bit our way was that during the negotiations, we put more and more use cases in the list. We changed the definitions to capture every potential risk and so on. And nowadays, as many of you know, the whole AI Act, even and it's always creating a laugher, I will try here, even I who wrote the AI Act do often not really understand in all parts what it's saying, what it's telling companies to do. And this, of course, legal uncertainty is toxic when it comes to new investments and new technology, with a lot of unclarity for companies. Maybe just a last part, where, however, I think now where we have the act and it's being adopted, and at least in the European Union, companies need to follow due to the legal uncertainty, which not only affects companies, but also myself, public authorities, and so on. I think those companies that are doing the basics, and I mentioned already a few, and you also, things like risk management, documentation, human oversight, data governance, and so on. I think those companies are safe because they are kind of checking the box that the regulator will examine now. And again, I do believe that for many companies, it brings an added value to think a little bit deeper about, you mentioned it, how those difficult parts of the AI stack are fitting together. Who, for example, is a deployer? Who is a provider? In the AI value chain, how different actors are working together? Who is providing the data, and so on. So all of that, I hope the AI Act is still contributing. And then, even though there are a lot of flaws, maybe even in Europe, it's bringing a little bit of added value.
Well, I think it's a different discussion. I think would be interesting to do this because, of course, what we hear and you see many comments is that, especially if you add the act and the data privacy policies that we have in Europe, that we are preventing a lot of innovation, and we're losing. We're just losing we're losing to the US and to China because they can actually try out stuff that we can't do. But it would be an interesting conversation only on that. So coming to you again. The platforms, how do these platforms help large enterprises scale AI in a, let's say, responsible way, especially when you have different speed in internal teams, right? We had a discussion before that many teams and many different divisions are a part of it. So how do you do that? And how do you manage that?
It's a great question, and I'll take it in two parts. The first part, we'll continue with the governance piece we're just talking about. So think of governance and risk management and security as well, not as a gatekeeper, but part of infrastructure. And platform actually provides the infrastructure to be able to build on top of it with continuous improvement on top. So as we were mentioning before, AI Act, for example, it's a continuous process. It needs to evolve over a period of time because we don't foresee everything.
And Kai, it will, right? It will evolve. Promised.
Yeah. And then the platform, if you talk about, it's also about interoperability. It also provides the ability to bring in the interconnectivity and interoperability with standards. So, for example, connecting different systems with a particular set of standards, which can be adopted by everybody across. And the third is, we talk about velocity. Mismatch. What is happening in the enterprise world is that the innovation team, they are like private jets. They want to fly very quickly. Yeah. And then you have your governance team, which is like commercial planes, right? Like they are like really looking at, I need to get these things done before they really move. And then you have operations team, which is like, I'm getting things done which I was supposed to do last year, right? So, how does this work is we need to think about platform into two different ways, right? One is the ability to provide the innovation team to fly quickly, but at the same point of time, have the operations team think about interconnectivity between the different systems and be able to build on top of the platform quickly.
Mm-hmm. So maybe to all of you, and we have to close, if we go to leadership level, what is needed? And we had actually, I think I asked that question to everybody here today because we want to get the answers. What is needed on leadership level to accelerate the adoption? Because we know we need adoption. If you look at the trust in the technology, population, workforce, it's not big. And we know any advance in any cultural change that you try in an organization has to be lived by the organization. We need the humans to join. So what is needed on leadership level here to take the whole organization along? What do you see from your perspective? Because you bring a different background to the table. Maybe you want to start.
Absolutely. So from my perspective, I would say I speak with a lot of leaders who are looking at implementation, is not thinking about should I adopt AI, but more about how do I restructure the organization to make sure that the AI and the human co-workers can work together and bring mutual benefits to the organization at the organization level.
Eva?
I think it's a conviction that this is a fundamental change, but it's if done right, future-proofing the organization. So like really looking into this is allowing to build on my strength, this is allowing to sort of fortify my strength into the future. And the alternative is like slow death. So like, I think, and it's not a nice to have. It's not like something to get to later. It's not like something to wait and see how it's going to turn out. It's something you have to be convinced, and this has to start from the very top, that this is elementary, and you're not going to survive if you don't adopt, because others will adopt.
To me, it all boils down again to leadership behavior. There needs to be clear executive ownership, a simple story that can be told to the whole organization why AI matters, aligned roles and incentives, and then the leaders need to walk the talk. They need to be the right role models. They need to be the first ones to use AI, the first ones to ask for AI-driven insights, and they need to invest into AI and data literacy skills for their
role models. You would say like we need role models.
Exactly. They need to lead by example. And when leadership is visible and consistent, then all of the organization stops feeling like AI is forced on top of it, but it's a direction they all can move towards together.
Yeah, it's always difficult as the last one because I agree basically on everything. But maybe to go back to the AI Act in 2018 when I started with the first panels, the level of AI literacy at the C-level was rather low back then. And this makes me rather positive nowadays because I see over the last years there was a lot of talk on AI. And indeed, CEOs 5-6 years ago wanted to do AI because it was hype, because it was a buzzword. But I do see nowadays that people are starting with the right questions. Do I need the most advanced AI? Your example is really good. In most cases, a simple old AI system, not something fancy on deep learning, is way enough. Maybe sometimes we don't even need AI. And I think, those questions now coming up more and more, and CEOs going very strategically to this question is a very good step. And hopefully most companies are doing it.
Maybe to add, in the last panel, we even had, you remember, somebody saying we have to slow down because the speed is so fast that we shouldn't get nervous about it, but rather do, proper work and be fast and slow at the same time. So thank you for coming. Thank you for the contribution here. And I want the audience to give a big applause to our panelists. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.